Hey, you all, Farmer Jesse here. Got a special bonus episode of the podcast for you again this week. This one with Ari Memar of Farmhand. This may not surprise you, but I am not the most tech-savvy dude in the world, so I was excited to chat with Ari, not just about the program he built there at Farmhand, but about the tech world in general. He worked at Uber in the early years of that company and talks about that experience. That was super fascinating. He grew up with a big garden and enjoying good food, and we discuss what that experience was like. And we get a rundown of Farmhand, which acts sort of like a personal assistant for farmers. And I think it is a really cool and really accessible idea. Oh, and we also discuss Persian food, which sounds absolutely delicious. Of course, in the name of full disclosure, Farmhand is a sponsor of this podcast and of the No-Till Market Garden podcast. But like always, when we interview a sponsor, the deal is that the conversation has to add value to the listener, like any other interview that we do. And Ari was absolutely more than happy to oblige and get nerdy with me. So without further ado, here is Ari Memar of Farmhand at gofarmhand.com. Ari Memar, welcome to the podcast.
Awesome. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Thanks for coming on. I'm super excited to chat today. So I thought maybe we could start with you just telling us a little bit about your background. I think you told me before that you grew up with a family garden. Is that kind of how it started for you?
Yeah. I was born in San Francisco. Don't have a lot of memories there because I bounced around the Bay Area when I was pretty young. But my parents ultimately settled in Palo Alto. And yeah, I just grew up around good food, backyard gardening, the outdoors. My mom started a flower business when I was younger and later had a landscape design business. She was an accountant by trade, but her heart was definitely not with numbers. It was definitely more with plants. And so I was exposed to that firsthand. My dad was in tech. He worked for Hewlett Packard growing up. And my first grade class was actually on the cover of Newsweek magazine because we were like the first elementary school with the internet. So it was a pretty cool time to be a first grader in that classroom, mainly for the games you could play with the internet. My mom was an amazing cook. We were lucky we had a farmer's market near us. So, we'd walk there over the weekends. We had a backyard garden, fruit trees, veggies, and just a lot of my favorite memories as a child were involving food, nature, and the garden. So it was something that was being indoctrinated in me without really knowing it.
In that you said your mom ran like a flower business. Was she growing a lot of the flowers, or were you all producing those out of your garden, or was it kind of like how did that look?
Yeah, so it was the classic Silicon Valley startup in the garage, but it was a refrigerator in the garage, and it was more of a florist type flower business. So she was running to the flower market early mornings. Arrangements were being made in the garage, and the business is actually still running today. Her partner she started the business with, it's now been passed on to her daughter. So it's not quite flower farming, but certainly exposed to growing flowers and what makes good flowers.
Yeah. Is there anything that stands out? Like when when I was a kid, we had my mom had a small garden, and the only thing that she planted, at least the only thing I can remember her planting, were hot peppers. And I don't really know why. Like neither of us really liked hot peppers, but I have this like very vivid memory of these jars, these like mason jars full of dried hot peppers. And I loved it. That was when I got the bug, I think. Like I loved gardening. I liked being in the dirt. But I didn't do a lot of it. And that was like the first one that I really, really remember. Are there things like that stand out for you? Like, was there, a specific garden memory or a sort of, I don't know, relationship with growing food that stands out?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think there was definitely the period of time that I tried to black out, which was all the weeding I was doing for being punished for childhood antics. So aside from that, it was all positive. And, as a kid, like I think my palate was just not quite developed. So I wasn't like as into veggies. I did like fruit a lot. So we had some really, really nice fruit trees. My favorite being the Asian pear tree we had. And yeah, my mom was meticulous with like pruning and like trying different natural fertilizers. And she had her garden notebook. And so she would like take notes of like all the things she did this season. And then like when we harvested, like how did it taste? What did it look like? And so, I do remember like as a child when the fruits would come on, those few weekends, we'd pick them all, we'd put them in, brown bags, hand them out to family, the neighbors. And I still to this day, like just crave that like cold Asian pear in the fridge. You like bring it out, you slice it and you just like snack on it. And I think that, like those positive memories of good food, good quality food, they kind of stick with you, and it really changes your relationship with food because you just associate it in a much more like positive way, and you kind of crave the good things rather than, I don't know, maybe other kids were craving Oreos or Snickers bars or whatever else. Like I was craving maybe some healthier alternatives, and I guess at the time that was strange, but hopefully that becomes more normal.
Yeah, it's funny. I have, we have 2 kids, and I have one who doesn't like anything we grow. Like, won't eat. I mean, we'll eat a little spinach, we'll eat like carrots and stuff, but loves all the weeds. Like, won't pick them, but enjoys eating them, like all the sorrel and kind of the various edible weeds. Like, it's very strange. Like, you expect, I think, being a parent and on a farm, that I expect my kid to like really enjoy the food, and they just, they're kind of indifferent to it, which I always think is funny. I mean, some of it they love, like carrot. Like I said, carrots is one, and my younger one seems to eat, a lot more veggies. But it's just funny, you never know. And then, but like with you, it's sort of, I get inspiration from that, thinking like, oh, maybe I'm planting the seed that will kind of like, turn into something later on.
Yeah, and I think that's really more how it was, because I know like my mom would tell me like you were 5 years old and like you would just want to eat like a stick of butter and rice, but like that's not what I'm doing now. Like far from it. Like I mean, I still like rice and butter, but I'm eating a lot more balanced, and I think those things, unfortunately for parents, sometimes don't yield results like next day, right? Like you gotta kind of play the long game on it.
Yeah, that's funny. The rice and butter one I relate to too, because my mom always served, or she would make all these great things. We ate like artichokes and all these fun things that a lot of kids I don't think got exposed to when they were young. But also like I pretty much only ever wanted pasta and butter and pepper. That was it.
Yeah,
like that's
I was the same way.
I was like, oh, this is all great, but can you just get me some pasta and butter? I'm good with that. It's funny. Yeah. And the fruit tree thing is interesting too, because like I grew up in Colorado, and then I moved out to Kentucky when I was like I moved all over the place, but I was never in a place that really had fruit trees. And I have this like visceral reaction to seeing like fruit loaded on trees. Like when my buddy Josh Satin and I went to California and we saw all the citrus in the wintertime, and we were just like blown away at how much citrus there was just like on a tree that you could pick and eat it. It was like a mind-boggling thing. I could imagine growing up with that just being like a really special experience that sticks with you.
Yeah, I mean, it's crazy. Like you're staring at this tree in the winter that looks like, oh, okay, it's like small, not much going on. And then like a few months later, it's like loaded, and you're like, wow, like this is wild. Like you're going to get this many fruit from this one tree. So yeah, it's definitely like leaves an imprint.
Yeah. It's so amazing. And then you said, your family did a lot of cooking and a lot of like really loved food. And I remember you told me before we started talking about they'd go to the farmer's market and stuff. Do you like have any specific memories, or like how did that stand out for you?
Yeah, I mean, for me, like this was kind of like, predating like the Food Inc. like mainstream awareness of nutritional value, or like real food versus processed food. And like, are we nutrition, depleted as kind of mainstream consumers? Cheerios, I believe, was still at like the base of the food pyramid. So yeah, like I was a lot younger, and I remember like going with family. I think for me, like I wasn't as like engaged as my mom. I could see like my mom was engaged, like chatting with the different farmers, looking at the different produce, seeing, what's seasonal, what's in, what's not. The real memory like I have from all of that is just like, we had really tasty things in our fridge. So like when I wanted sweets, I was eating strawberries. Like when I wanted a snack, we were doing like cucumbers, like and carrots and things like that. And Yeah, I think just eating like healthy, nutritional food kind of like became the norm. I think as a child, I was like pretty naive to like the business side of what was going on. I was just sort of like, I'm hungry. Like, what can I eat as a snack? And I'd open up the fridge and I'd see what's there. I'd ask my mom, and the options there in front of me were generally like what would be considered healthier options. And my mom just didn't want to carry, sugary drinks, processed food, etc. And so that curiosity about food, I think for me certainly grew over time. But early on, I think it was just pretty simple. It was like I just want to have a snack.
Sure. Yeah, that's funny. I mean, I had very similar thing where it was like my mom would, yeah, there would always be berries and fruit. Whatever fruit was in season was always kind of in the fridge.
There was just tasty stuff at the farmer's market. Like you just go there and like, there'd be the little like food vendors that were preparing stuff, and you'd have that, or then you'd have the samples and you'd be like, oh my gosh, what was that? Like I've never even like seen something that looks like that before. And then you'd get in a conversation. So those are the types of things I remember. Like I just love the free samples. I loved, trying new things and it being like super sweet. And yeah, like as a kid, I think that's ultimately what you want, like sugary stuff to give you energy.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. So maybe talk about a little bit where you are now. Do you have, I think you told me you have like a sort of farmstead of sorts. Like where are you these days?
Yeah, so I was in San Francisco, basically like at the beginning of the pandemic. And yeah, I just found it increasingly difficult to be in San Francisco during the pandemic. I think during that period of time, a lot of people were thinking about like what brings them joy, like what do they want to do, picking up hobbies. For me, it was really about wanting to be in nature. I found myself, trying to get out of the city, spend more time outside of the city. And yeah, just appreciating like the small things, observing the seasons, like how little things change, like looking at the stars at night, seeing a full moon, like bird watching, like all these things that you kind of take for granted that you can't really do in the city. And for me, like my family is here, like my kind of support system is here. So the idea of like moving super far away, like seems scary and a bad idea. But the idea of living like kind of more in harmony with nature, kind of more in the country, was becoming like increasingly interesting and something I wanted to do. During that same period of time, I was definitely getting a lot more into like cooking and food. Before I was just, working long hours, eating a lot of meals like at work, eating out. And, my partner and I we were just like discussing, and I was like chatting with her, like, hey, like, what do you see for the future? What do you want to do? And we kind of formulated this dream together for like what the next chapter of our life could look like. And it would be outside of the city, like in the country, on a homestead, like growing our own food, raising a family there, being sustainable. And yeah, I mean, lots of people thought we were crazy, it's like two city slickers about to like go out in the country, don't know anybody there, like living like independently. Okay, sounds like a horrible idea. Sounds like a bunch of things are going to go wrong. But ultimately, like we made the move. I'm in West Sonoma County, like close to, it's a small city, Occidental. It's like 20 minutes west of Santa Rosa. That's like the next biggest city near us. And yeah, I made the move. We're on 5 acres now. Previously, we were in a 800 square foot apartment. And I found kind of like 2 really great resources. One is obviously like YouTube University, like just there's a video for everything. And then the second is just good neighbors. There's a great local community here, especially in the kind of like the ag space and in the farmer world. Like everybody's just super nice. Like, hey, come on over. Like I'll help you out. And yeah, it's easy to get information if you're seeking information, was kind of what I learned. And we have 100 plus fruit trees. It's an old orchard. This area used to be predominantly apple orchard. It's kind of since been, a lot of the trees have been chopped down and it's changed. A lot of grapes have gone in. But I'm proud to have some of those old trees on our property. And that's the predominant production, mainly apples, but we've got, 10, 15 other types of fruit. And then I really got into vegetables too. So we established some raised beds. There's kind of a nice little sunny spot that's fenced. And we, set it up to grow vegetables. Still kind of early on in our fruit and veggie growing journey, making a lot of mistakes, but also seeing some good successes along the way. And, so far we've just mainly been growing for ourselves and kind of like our extended family and community that we already have. But I think over time, really our goal is to like, once we have kids, get the kids involved and then, grow for more than just like our own family. But right now, as with anything, like you're just getting started, a lot of infrastructure work, a lot of just like basic understanding work, just getting kind of all that set up first before taking it kind of to the next level. So yeah, it's our second year, kind of going through that now, but we love it. It's so much fun. It doesn't feel like work. It just feels like, just like a ton of fun.
Yeah, that does sound. What kind of fruit trees are there?
So the interesting thing is I had a lot of people come and like, I'd taken my apples. Predominantly, most of my apples are like 3 different kinds. One of them kind of like looks more like a Gravenstein type apple. And we do have Gravenstein trees, which are the main kind of like apple varietal out here that kind of gained, some sort of, prestige in the area. But a lot of them just bloom a lot later. So like, I don't actually think they're Gravensteins. And I had some people tell me, oh, those are Romes. I had some people tell me those are, something else, but I think they're mainly Gravensteins, Romes. We have some really cool, red devils. They're like dark red with like their flesh is like white with like a little bit of almost like pink going into it. So some really weird varietals of apples. Then we've got, some of the biggest Asian pear trees I've ever seen, like humongous, which is kind of a pain when it comes to getting the fruit, but, they look great. We've got fig trees, we've got plum trees, we've got peach, we've got persimmon. What else do we got? I'm like literally staring outside, looking at my trees, trying to tell you what we have. So it's predominantly apples though. It's like 90% of the trees are apples, and then on the veggie side, my favorites personally the Persian cucumbers. I'm Persian kind of background, so tried to incorporate like growing some of the things that you find in Persian cuisine. And I'm just connected to a lot of farmers out here. So I'm always like trying to figure out what are like cool things I can grow or what are things that we eat out here that we're not producing ourselves. So like, could we start producing it? Kind of working backwards from like the types of things I like to eat.
What else is in Persian cuisine that maybe I don't know that I know much about Persian cuisine.
A lot of herbs, a ton of herbs. So like, I have two of my beds are predominantly herbs. So like, we'll do a lot of, like rice and work in herbs like dill, cilantro, things like that. And then we've got different kinds of like thyme. We also will make like a lot of stews. Again, like the stews will have different herbs in it as well. There's a couple dishes I really like one of them is an eggplant dish. And it's more of like the more delicate, like Japanese, like style eggplants, not like the big giant Italian ones. And then there's a lot of like, like salads or things like that kind of are like more like tomato, cucumber, onion based. I think like I obviously think Persian cuisine is the best, but I'm highly biased, but everyone should try their closest Persian restaurant. But a lot of the like homegrown recipes tend to not be at the restaurants, and they tend to be not too heavy on like spices or overpowering like you might see with like Indian cuisine, like a lot more subtle. And it's really nice. I try to cook it, 1 to 2 times a week.
Yeah, that sounds amazing. I'm a big fan. As I've gotten older, I want herbs on like everything. I'm like, I just want herbs on everything. I don't know what that is. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's definitely become quite a must for me. I always want to finish it. I'm like, I got to have an herb, something.
Yeah.
And then, okay, so you said you were living in San Francisco. Was that like, is your background in tech? I mean, that's just what I associate with San Francisco. Is that sort of what you were doing there?
Yeah, that would be an accurate stereotype and association. I had been working at Uber. So I had joined when Uber was kind of in the startup phase and had been there for about 5 years. And prior to that, I had gone to UCLA, studied chemical engineering, and then worked at a production facility, and had kind of moved into operations management, was running, 1/5 of a large production plant. So kind of had this background in like engineering, operations, business, like startups. At Uber, I was working on a lot of the newer business lines like bike share, public transit, scooter share, finding ways to get people who wanted to be Uber drivers access to vehicles that were eligible to drive on the platform. So things like rentals and leases and discounts. So it gave me a pretty broad exposure to business and technology. And I think most importantly, aside from like the actual work that was done, just like incredible in terms of confidence building to like be able to think you could start a company. The people I worked for and worked with were all like had started companies or were starting companies. So for me, that was like the most important takeaway of that experience was like, hey, like you can actually just like start a company as your next job. Like that wasn't something that I'd ever thought about before. I kind of had an entrepreneurial itch, but not necessarily had like the confidence or like belief in myself to know, hey, you can actually do this yourself.
And you don't feel like we have to put this in there if you don't, want to talk too much about it. But like, I think,
yeah.
I mean, you mentioned Uber, and I'm just curious, like, what was that atmosphere like in like a new startup? Like, what is that experience like? Is it, because I always just assume it's kind of bonkers. Like you have a lot of young, brilliant people like throwing, the tech world together. Like, what was that experience like?
Yeah. I mean, my experience at Uber was like 3 different experiences in one. So like experience 1 was, all right, this is like a new, like novel concept of like ride sharing. It's like significantly more convenient and like accessible for consumers versus, taxi hailing on the street. And, a lot of people don't know this backstory. And my boss at Uber at the time, Jahan, had actually started ride sharing at a different company called Sidecar. And the genesis for ride sharing was actually, there was a neighborhood in San Francisco that was predominantly LGBTQ, and they were struggling like getting taxis, essentially. Like they couldn't get it. Nobody would pick them up. So there was this group that had started that would help people that weren't getting taxi rides, like get a ride. And it was just kind of like a volunteer peer-to-peer service. And that was kind of the genesis of the idea of ride sharing. It's like, hey, this is like a stranger in a car who like is going to drive you somewhere. And Uber originally started more as kind of like in the black car business, which was more like the private, hired driver, professional driver model. But then Uber kind of shifted their model, recognizing that like there was a bigger opportunity with this, peer-to-peer, anybody can be your driver model. And so when I had joined, like peer-to-peer was the thing, like that was the model, and that model was scaling. It was scaling everywhere. It was going to, every city in the world. So it was an interesting period of time to be at a company where like you've got this, core product that is being accepted across the world, and we're trying to scale it, and there's all these challenges, and it's just growing incredibly fast. Like when I had joined, there was a few thousand people. Like within 6 to 12 months, there was like the amount of people at the company had like doubled, tripled, quadrupled. Like it was growing like ridiculously fast. And so that was a fun experience. But then, fast forward, then there's like the controversy experience. So it's like as a part of growing fast, certain decisions were made that maybe undermined the trust of the consumer or the trust of the drivers. And that led to some challenges. And so the CEO and founder was removed, and like a new CEO came in, and then the company was taken public and actually IPO'd. So through those 3 phases, I was there through it. I kind of left right after the IPO happened. But I was exposed to like this like weird, unique phases of growing a company, both positive and negative. And that experience left me with a belief that if I'm going to start a company myself, like I know my moral compass is true. So that's super important. And then I've seen what it looks like to be a part of something that becomes very big. And a lot of people haven't kind of been in that phase. Most people join something that is big or join something that is small that never becomes big. But I was kind of in that transition period, which is just, really unique firsthand experience to have.
Yeah, that's so fascinating. And I feel like that's a good segue into talking about what you are and have created. So the site is called Farmhand and you find it at gofarmhand.com. Maybe maybe give us a very, basic sort of overview of what it is and how it works.
Yeah, definitely. So Farmhand is an all-in-one software platform and virtual assistant for farms that are selling locally. And so the way I look at it is there's a lot of parts vendors out there that are providing a thing to a farmer, but you need to put all those things together to actually do the thing you want to do, whether that's send a basic communication, have a website, accept a CSA sign up, accept payments, provide member support. So Farmhand kind of takes all of these disparate systems across website, communications and engagement, design, marketing, CSA, farm stand, events, payments, automation support, et cetera, and delivers it in one platform with a conversational interface and support system such that all farmers need to do is be able to speak and write in English and communicate what they want done. So that interface and that service layer kind of around the technology is what ultimately enables farmers to save on average about 5 to 10 hours a week and help them earn on average about 20% more just through having a properly dialed in system for their farm management and customer communications and sales.
Okay, so all right, so let me start this question over. All right, so with that, can you so pretend I'm a farmer and I'm wanting to join this system, or I'm on the system. What does my day look like? Like, how do I interact with it?
Yeah, so let's say it's Monday today. You're in the field. You're away from your computer, low connectivity. Let's say you're a market farm. You do maybe a couple markets over the weekend. You have a CSA. You have a small, maybe restaurant wholesale part of the business. You're receiving real-time alerts and notifications via text or email. You receive a notification, a new CSA member signed up. That CSA member signed up through the Farmhand Manage website and CSA sign-up page. You see that sign-up actually generated from a marketing flyer that was created by Farmhand that you handed out at the market to customers that were buying from you. And then you actually don't see some things because they're deflected by Farmhand. For instance, a handful of CSA members had requests to change their pickup locations for the upcoming order. One of them wanted to pause because there's a medical emergency, so they're going to be gone for a couple of weeks. And so those adjustments were made on your behalf with the policies you have in place. A customer had a failed payment. It was automatically followed up. Farmhand automatically followed up and made sure the payment was made. A new payment method was used. And so that happened and was fixed automatically. And then you can initiate requests to Farmhand as well. So you have a contact card, and that contact card can be communicated to via email, via text, or within the application itself. And you ask Farmhand to add flowers to your online shop because Easter is coming up. You think, some people might be ordering flowers, and you kind of put together a flower bouquet for it as a special, seasonal add-on. And then you ask Farmhand to update your hours because they're going to be slightly different for the Easter holiday. And so that was cascaded to your website, to your fulfillment options, to your Google business profile, all through one text message or email to Farmhand. And then you receive a reminder notification from Farmhand. It's telling you, hey, what's upcoming in this week's CSA, so we can communicate to members. So you respond back with the items, just bullet points. You respond back, include a recipe with Romanesco. And then you also mention that you want to offer Easter flowers special promotion. Then Farmhand generates a visual newsletter. So it's got what's in the box. It's got a small story from the farm. It's got the recipe with Romanesco. It's got the upsell to the flowers. And it's delivered to you via a draft that you then can approve or modify, and then it's scheduled to be sent out to your CSA members automatically at 4 p.m. today. So fast forward to tomorrow, orders have come in. The ordering period is closed for the CSA for Thursday pickup. Farmhand sends you a message letting you know exactly what you need to prepare for the given fulfillment period. In this case, you've got access to printable reports because let's say you're doing pickup sites and home delivery. So you hand off the pick and pack kind of reports to the crews that are going to help you with that. Or if you're doing it yourself, you just print it out and do it yourself. And then you have delivery routes auto-generated. You have sign-out sheets auto-generated for the pickup points. So as you go into each of those, workflows, whether you're a CSA farm or kind of doing online kind of pre-orders for your farm stand or the market, you're getting kind of just-in-time communications with what you need for kind of the next step to take. And then at the same time, you are initiating the upsells and the consistent communications to your customers without having to carry on the baggage of actually now I got to go into Canva and make this image. And now I got to go into MailChimp and prepare this email. And now I got to go and update my customer list because there was 2 other people that signed up at the market. So let's get their emails in. So all of those steps that kind of prevent you from actually doing the thing you want, all of those things are just happening because we've built these workflows for them. And then if there's any issues or questions that pop up, you can just initiate, communication conversationally through Farmhand. So yeah, that's kind of like a short but maybe long explanation of a typical day. And hopefully that gives you an idea of what the interaction model looks like.
No, I like that. I like the idea of especially something like having to design a flyer. That seems like such a small thing, but then when you sit down and you have to do those little things, that takes up a lot of time. I do that all the time for no-till growers, for instance. I'm always having to design something or look for a photo or something to post for Instagram or all the stuff that we have to do and that's not farm related. That's not even related to the farm stuff I have to do. So those things take up an enormous amount of time. I think that's a really good touch, especially, like you mentioned, the MailChimp and that sort of thing. But my question, I think, is what does setup look like? What is the sort of setup process for, if you're a farmer getting started with Farmhand?
Yeah, so the setup process is pretty easy. I think a lot of people associate oh my God, I'm getting this new website. This is going to be a huge project. I can only really mentally even think about it in November in the off season. And once I kind of get into the conversation with the farmer, they realize it's actually not that hard of a setup process because we have a lot of the templates and structure set up. We just need a little bit of direction with regards to the branding, the aesthetic, the details of the business that may not be publicly visible. But most of the information we can just pull from your existing website, your existing social media, your existing communications, and your existing spreadsheets, or if you're on another, system, your existing system. And we have a small, 1-page intake form. We just clarify the details of that process. And once we have those details, your logos, your photos, the actual parts of your business, then we create the website for you. We send it to you for approval. You maybe make a few quick edits or modifications. And then if you're good with it, you connect your bank account, you make payment, and you're launched. So the whole process can take just a few days if you get all the information quickly. For others, if they use it as an opportunity to kind of recast the business or expand upon what they were doing before, maybe takes a little bit longer to get all the information right. But yeah, overall, it's a pretty seamless process for farmers to move over from no system or an existing system to Farmhand.
Yeah, that's good. That's great. I'm fascinated by this because I have kind of 2 questions, and maybe it's one question, but sort of 2. But I'm a dummy about these things. So what's the difference between what you're doing and in what this is, what Farmhand is versus an app? Are those the same thing, or is that a different thing?
Yeah. So an application is a pretty, I guess, like broad general term. And so we are an application, which I think the definition would say it's like a programming interface would be an application. But for what we are, that makes us different is we've chosen to build the application so it has a conversational interface and it can be accessed on the internet, so via a direct website link or via your email or via text message. So that's a kind of like a design choice we made. And the reason we made that design choice is because there is a lot of friction and overhead to have people download applications and learn applications. And if we could just make it do exactly what you wanted to do from written English, that is probably the easiest interface for farmers and for the customers of farmers. And so if the expectation is now all you need to know is how to speak and write English, well, that's a lot easier to use than if you need to now, go on a bunch of tutorials or videos or webinars just to figure out how to like send an email that says what's in your upcoming CSA, right? So that's kind of the difference in terms of approach. The speed of development for us too in building one application that works across those interfaces without having to deal with like you got to do something special for like iOS because of the Apple users, and you got to do something special for Android because of the Google users. It just increases the envelope of complexity when you're developing a new product like ours. And so to keep it simple and to keep it really easy to use for farmers and their customers, we kind of opted for this, omni-channel model where you can text, you can email, you can go into the website, and it doesn't matter. All three are options.
Okay, so I think that's kind of brilliant because I have this like, I don't know, I don't download new apps, like very rarely.
No, and a lot of people don't. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's, I mean, I just hadn't even really thought about the fact that like the apps I use the most are email, like my Gmail app,
Yep.
and my text message app, my Messenger. So like,
Yep.
beyond that, maybe Instagram or something, but like beyond that, I don't use apps. And so like this makes a lot of sense to me, and kudos to you for coming up with the idea of like kind of skipping that whole process. And then, I think that's like a really smart way to, especially for people like me, like I'm not super tech savvy. So yeah, I mean, I think that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. And you're not alone, right? I think most people in kind of the ag space are not tech savvy, and most of their customers are not tech savvy. So it would be, I think, a big miss if I were to be developing a product for those customers and I would be asking them to build a bunch of technology sophistication to use the product, right? I just want them to be able to use it right away and see the return on investment right away, which is why we've taken the model we've taken.
Is there just like an enormous amount of work that goes into doing, like developing something like this? Like, what does it look like?
Oh my gosh, so much work. Yeah. Like I think, it's always funny because those conversations come up all the time where you're like, hey, like what went into building it? Or like, would you recommend, building it or would you recommend like for someone else to start a company? And I think like the short answer is like, if you are not all consumed, crazy, passionate about your idea to the point where you're like waking up at night dreaming about it, you probably shouldn't like do it because it's something you need to be like obsessed with in terms of like a problem you want to solve and an area you want to focus on and a customer you want to help. Because without that, like it's a lot of work and it takes a lot of perseverance to kind of get through the nitty gritties and the challenges ahead. And so, in my case, I really connected with local farmers, and I really appreciated the difficulty and care by which they were growing amazing food and being stewards of the environment by which they were growing it in. And I just thought like this is an incredibly like thankless job in many cases, and people are doing like such amazing work. And the complexity of what they're doing, especially on the small, medium-sized producers, which is the majority of producers, is incredible. Like they're not only doing the farming stuff, they're doing all the non-farming stuff, which is like its own full-time job. So I really, when I got exposed to that, I was like, well, there are like a lot simpler ways to do some of the things you're trying to do. And I can actually do it better because like I understand the technology, the marketing, the sales, and I can just do it better for you. And so like I started helping people with just like websites or sending, emails to chefs or whatever else. So like, again, very basic things. And I just wanted to make those things easier to do for more people. So that's where you're like, okay, well, I got to scale myself. I just can't just keep doing this like ad hoc. Got to build some scalability into this system. And, as an outsider to ag, like I didn't have the baggage of there being 1,000 reasons why this wouldn't work. I think a lot of people kind of back away from trying something because, they know too much in some cases. I just felt like from the people I had met, I know I can help them earn more, and I know they can work less if they just streamline some of the things they're doing and implement some very basic digital marketing, like best practices. That was just my basic insight. And so I was like, if I can do that, like there'll be a business. It'll eventually form. And yeah, you got to start prototyping. Like, obviously, if you're not embarrassed of the first version of your product, you probably waited too long to like get it out. That's kind of like the saying. So got a lot of early customer feedback, had a lot of patient customers. And I think part of it too is like when you're helping a farmer get off of like a spreadsheet system or a system by which like they're just failing to communicate to customers or just missing communications, the bar is actually set like kind of low. I mean, it's, some people do a great job, but a lot of people like struggle just to keep like the website's out of date. The communications are not going out consistently. People are trying to reach out. They can't get a hold of the farmer. So like, that's kind of like the base case oftentimes I'm entering in. And so I can be helpful pretty quickly. And then it's just a question of like, how do I start making that helpfulness available to more and more people? And that's the part that, again, gets difficult because you want to build in some scalability into what you're doing, and you need to support certain intricacies in the different ways people do things to make it work the same way for you as it might for another farmer. So yeah, it's just a slog from there. Like you get, signal of where you should go next from your customers. And then you're just trying to deliver them joy as fast as possible. But, with a small team, like there's only so fast you can go. So you're just trying to be intentional about kind of what you do next and make sure you're making progress and making it better and better every day.
Yeah. And you can take a second to think about this one because I didn't really prompt you for it, but was there anything else that, any other features that you feel like you want to mention for people that may be looking at Farmhand?
Well, I think the biggest one is really just like, it's an all-in-one system and it can be updated conversationally. Like, I think if you take away two things, like that's the main takeaway. And for me, like a lot of times I'll talk to customers and they're like, well, like maybe I want to just start with like, let's just move the CSA over. And I'm like, that's fine. Like I can sell you a part if you just want the CSA. But let me explain to you why for the CSA to be successful, you might not want just the CSA management piece of what we do. And the reason being is because people are going to meet you offline or online. So if they're going to meet you online, they're going to meet you probably through social media, maybe through a Google search. So your website needs to be SEO optimized. So it's got all the right keywords so you show up. You need to have your Google business profile established and representative of what you're doing. You need to make sure your website looks professional and that it represents your brand. It looks like people can feel like they're at the farm. People can feel like they know you. People can see your produce. And for many people, it just needs to make sure people know like you're in business, right? Like you actually exist. And then maybe they're meeting you offline. So if they're meeting you offline, all those interactions you're already having at your farm stand, at your farmer's market, where's the asset that you're providing them, the little flyer, the little handout, informing them of your CSA, informing them of your email newsletter, getting them into your system? Are you pulling their information from your point of sale system and then including them in your emails? And so those little details all kind of need to be in place to then like drive the outcome. And so that's why for me, like I get a lot of energy when the like idea light bulb goes off in the farmer's eye, and they're like, now I get it. It's like all of these things are going to go together. You're going to give me the marketing assets. You're going to help me get established online. You're going to introduce me into these workflows that work, and I'm going to customize the content to tell my story. And then once it's kind of moving, like it's just working. Like it's just, you're saving time. You're seeing the growth in terms of sales, both through new customers as well as existing customers spending more. But those things are not really, it's still possible and achievable if you do it yourself across a bunch of systems. It just takes a lot longer. To your point of the earlier example of, putting together little things for the podcast or for no-till, simple thing like putting together a QR code, like that may end up taking an hour, or making an image that may end up taking an hour. So if you could just instead focus on the strategy or the production of the quality product or the interactions with customers in person or online, like what difference would that make? Now you're kind of moving yourself from maybe lower value time, like admin work, trying to put together things where you're not an expert in those things, to the things you actually are an expert in or want to develop the expertise in, taking a strategy that you have and actually making it implemented. And a lot of times people, I think, stumble on that execution step, right? Like they have the ideas, they have the vision, they know what they want to do, but it's actually executing it that's hard because there's all these details that kind of get in your way. So for me, it's like, how can we remove those details? Like, I don't want to expose the complexity in doing a simple thing to the farmer. Like, I want to absorb that complexity and just make it as simple and easy as possible for the farmer.
Yeah, it's funny because you're describing this and I'm like, there are other things I could use. like my soccer, I coach youth soccer and I'm like, I have to communicate with the parents and organize a bunch of stuff like all the time. And I'm like, oh yeah, I mean, it's essentially just like a virtual assistant, like you call it.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, Ari, this has been a lot of fun. I really appreciate you coming on and chatting with me about Farmhand. And I just want to wish you all the best on this project. It sounds very cool.
Thanks. Yeah, we're just getting started. I'm super appreciative of all the farmers that so far have joined our community and all the farmers that are kind of becoming a part of our extended community. And I think, this is a great resource you provide to farmers everywhere. And I've been a customer of yours and content consumer of yours for a while. So yeah, really privileged to be able to have this conversation with you, share a bit more, and looking forward to helping more and more farmers. And yeah, I encourage everybody to just check out gofarmhand.com. There's a link right there to book a demo with me. It's actually going to be with me. So that's kind of a cool little novelty. And yeah, you can explore more and see a bit more about the different customers we've helped and the results they've had, as well as probe a bit deeper into different aspects of the product, which we've touched upon in this conversation.
Very cool. Yeah. Well, thank you.
Thanks. You as well.
All right. We'll be in touch. All right. I hope you enjoyed that chat. If you would like to learn more about Farmhand, you can follow them on Instagram at GoFarmhand or at GoFarmhand.com. We will hook it up with links in the show notes as we always do. Follow us there as well on Instagram. Support our work by doing some shopping over at no-tillgrowers.com or joining the Patreon page at patreon.com/no-tillgrowers. Otherwise, we will be back with your regularly scheduled show on Monday. Enjoy the rest of the week, y'all. Bye.